Good evening and welcome to the Stow Candidates Night Forum. My name is Val Pasquantonio Weber and I will be your moderator this evening. This event is being sponsored by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, multi-issue, grassroots organization. We neither support nor oppose particular candidates, but do work to provide citizens with information and encourage active participation in the democratic process. We want to thank Jonathan, Daisy, and everybody from Stow TV as they are reporting tonight, and we ask everybody to always use microphones so that we can be heard on the tape. Our thanks to our town clerk, Linda Hathaway, for her help in planning this event and for being our timer this evening. And Linda, would you come up to a microphone and give us some information, please?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to let you know that we have the warrant for the town meeting. You all should have received one last week in the mail. If not, it is available online on the town's website. We also have in the back of the room some of our beautiful annual reports from 2018. So we've got plenty, so let's take some home. I need to get rid of them. And then also in the back will be our examples of our ballot that we have with the ballot questions in the candidates in office. And specimen ballots are also available online on the news and announcements page. So look there if you have any questions. All right, thank you.
While you're up there, can you explain the yellow and red?
Oh, yes. So tonight I have the speakers will have 3 to 5 minutes. I'm starting with the clocks at 5 minutes, and I'll give you a warning that when you get down to about 3 with a yellow card, and then when you get down to 1, I'll actually show that it's a 1 minute time, and then a red sign saying that you're done.
No karate chops, though. And thank you to Kathy Borowski, a league member who is here as a voter service coordinator, and to show us how this event is done. Kathy, we miss you here in Stow as we miss Donna Bush. Also thanks to Stow resident Ellen Sturgis, who has come up and helped us with the mechanics of this event. But especially I need to thank everybody here in the audience for your active participation in the democratic process. This year we are fortunate to have candidates running for each of the open board seats. All candidates who are on the ballot, have been invited to introduce themselves, to share past accomplishments and visions for their next terms if they're incumbents, or if new, to introduce themselves and their ideas and to answer questions this evening. Additionally, candidates who announced their intentions to run a writing campaign have been invited. We will hear from our candidates in 2 panels. Each candidate has been asked to take 3 to 5 minutes, as Linda said, to introduce themselves and tell us what they hope to accomplish during their term. There will be an opportunity for audience questions after each set of candidates has spoken. In addition to the candidates attending tonight, Bruce Morgan, Gary Yu, and Georgie Smith, all running unopposed for open seats on the Board of Assessors, cannot be with us tonight. Also, Mary McDowell, write-in candidate for the Board of Health, Marianne Sharon, candidate for Library Trustee, and Robert Larkin, candidate for Housing Authority, cannot be with us tonight. Once all candidates who are here have spoken, we will hear from the sponsors of the 2 ballot questions, followed again by audience questions. The first panel is seated. We have Town Moderator David Walrath, incumbent, and we have both Jim Salvi, incumbent, and Courtney Brecka, hopefully I said that right, who are candidates for the Board of Selectmen. Courtney is going to be replacing or is running for the seat that is currently held by Ingeborg Hegeman Clark. Forgive me for that pronunciation, who is not running for re-election, and we want to thank her for her service on the Board of Selectmen. We'll now hear from David Walrath. David?
Thank you. For those that don't know me, I'm running for the fourth time for town moderator. I think because the town moderator in my main role doesn't get to do it very often, I think I'm finally getting the hang of it the last couple of years, and decided to run again. I think the main thing that I get credit for is most of our town meetings we've kept to one night. I don't take most of the credit for that. A lot of that is the boards that present, keeping their presentations brief, and voters keeping repetition and things down. But I guess I can take some credit for moving things along a little bit. This next town meeting will run 2 nights, but we expect the second night will be in June. So we're hoping all except for one item of business that we'll get it done in one night, and you can try to hold me to that. The other major thing that I think that I've done is allowed Stow TV, when they requested to live show town meeting as it happened. Unfortunately, that will not happen this coming Monday due to some technical issues, but it will be played the next day and later. The other thing that I'd like to do in the future, and I've actually talked to our excellent state representative Kate Hogan about that, is to improve access. And I'm hoping in the next year or so to do a demonstration at town meeting of something like closed captioning called live captioning. We actually, for those that don't know, have, I think, still the highest percentage of senior citizens in town of any community in the Commonwealth. And some of us, including me, have some hearing issues. So if we could get that, that'd be a wonderful thing. And other than that, I will leave it there to keep it brief and allow our next speaker.
Thank you, David. Next, we'll hear from James Salvi, an incumbent for the Stow Selectmen.
Thank you. And thank you to the League for hosting this event, and to all the candidates for stepping forward. And thank you for the chance to discuss our goals for the future. I've been a selectman now for 9 years and 3 terms, and I've had the pleasure of serving not only on the Board of Selectmen, but on the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, the Pompo Building Committee, which I chaired, the Planning Board's Pedestrian Walkways Subcommittee and Lower Village Subcommittee, and a few other committees that I'm not going to bother to mention in the interest of time. I'm also currently chair of the Board of Selectmen. I think by now I've gained a good perspective on the town's overall needs, how it functions, and probably in particular its capital needs. Stow continues to enjoy excellent overall fiscal health. As we go into this annual town meeting, we've got over $3.5 million in stored rainy day assets, even after using some of that in the last several years to pay down capital projects and liability for retired employees' health care called OPEB. In fact, now one of our challenges is to spend some of those assets wisely. And I think we're doing that by not spending it on recurring operating costs, but rather continuing to put it toward OPEB and capital costs, including this year, most likely, the completion of the Lower Village Road project. I expect this town meeting will be dominated by discussion of the Lower Village project, as it should be, but it's worth noting that whatever we may decide to do there, We're in a good position to address the increased cost of that project largely through stored assets. Our net growth in property tax revenue is finally starting to show some upward movement after about 12 years of being stagnant. It's risen by about 5% this year. Our tax levy is about $2.3 million less than our legal levy limit, and that's significant that we're so far below our legal limit because so many of our neighboring towns tend to spend right up against their limits. That doesn't mean at all that we have no challenges. The entire time I have been a selectman, we've been challenged by capital projects. When I was first elected, we had just decided to renovate Center School. Then, in addition to the usual capital costs of fire trucks, police cars, highway vehicles, we successfully managed what I think of as the second wave of capital projects, a new fire station and community center. And we did that through a combination of timing, paring them down, and combining them. Now we face the long-range challenges of a third wave of capital projects, specifically a new high school in the somewhat distant future, a library renovation, and the completion of Lower Village. And none of that really answers the question of why I want to remain on the Board of Selectmen after 9 years, or why you ought to keep me there. I want to stay because of several challenges that are coming up that I think require experience on the board. And it seemed like a bad time for 2 brand new selectmen, though 1 brand new selectman is a very good idea. I'm also just starting to get the hang of the job, as David mentioned. First among those challenges, frankly, is the fact that our town administrator is retiring next year. Other senior town officials are not too far behind him. I don't think we can underestimate the importance of replacing the town administrator, and I want to play a big role in that. Bill Wrigley is the only town administrator this town has ever had, and whether you agree with him or not, he has a credibility, particularly on financial issues, that will be impossible for a new administrator to have, at least at first. But I'm sure that Bill Wrigley wasn't Bill Wrigley the first few years he was here, and we need to find someone who can come as close to that mark as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think that they're going to need help from experienced hands on the Board of Selectmen to do that. I also very much want to play a role in several other items that are just over the horizon. Some of our golf courses will be undergoing a transition very soon, and the planning board has started conversations about that I want to be a part of. After the Lower Village Road project is completed, and it will be completed, we need to work with the businesses in Lower Village to see what the town can do to bring water there. Water in Lower Village will probably be the single most important change we and the businesses can make to revitalize it and change its character. And transportation is a long neglected issue that I want to be involved in. And I think we can make some efforts to address the last mile, first mile problem with the South Acton train station, and maybe even, to some extent, the parking situation. We also have a great opportunity to connect with a network of bike trails that are popping up all around our town. For these reasons, I look forward to serving Stow for another term, and I ask for your support on May 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Courtney?
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. And thank you, Jim, for running again.
Thanks for saying that.
You're a hard act to follow. So I have roots in Stow from early in my life. My grandparents lived here, and I visited from an early age. And I've lived in town on and off. Most recently, I moved back to town 21 years ago. I like Stow because of the open space and the conservation values that we have, because of the farms and the feel of a rural town. I just gravitate toward that tone, and I love being close to the city, but being in this quiet town, which actually acts like a bigger town. I think we have a wonderful collegial atmosphere in the town offices, and that people work well together, which is not easy sometimes, just to make everything work. I like that as a town we work through difficult situations and come up with, I think, pretty good solutions for a range of opinions. And we manage to figure out how to not spend way too much money, but enough to get a good outcome for who we are and what our town is, how we like to be. Moving on to my experience in town politics, I've now been 6 years on the Conservation Commission, and pretty much immediately when I was appointed to the Conservation Commission, I was asked to be the representative to the Community Preservation Committee. So I've done the two of those in parallel and enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm an outdoorsy person and love nature, so that drew me to conservation. And then I learned that really I was administrating the law, and administering the law, which is quite different than spending time in the woods. Although maybe getting bitten by ticks is about as much fun as it really is. So, but I've really, one of the things I've wound up enjoying, oddly, is the difficult conversations that come up in an application process when perhaps the permit in question is for something that someone did, not understanding that there was a law that prohibited or circumscribed what they were trying to do. And so finding a way, again, to make things right, to kind of settle into a place where everybody is served and everybody's opinion's been heard and there's some consensus reached. I have not a professional background, but just kind of some experience in land conservation. The property I live on has a conservation restriction, which is a way of extinguishing the building rights on a piece of property that could support more houses otherwise. And that is something that pertains to possibly to large parcels of land like a golf course, coming out of Chapter 61 and coming up for an option to buy with the town. And also there are other ramifications if on the Conservation Commission, it's just another way that land can be protected, and so we get involved. The reason I'd like to be a selectman is that, as Jim said, our town administrator is going to be leaving, and I think it's a moment to pay attention and just do a really good job finding a person that will serve us as well as Bill Wrigley has. I also, being familiar with the Chapter 61, again, the conversion of properties, I hope it's something that I can contribute to the conversation. It's when those things come up, for those of you that know what it is, it's the town has to move quickly if it wants to purchase property, and so that's it. I am in a way new to all of this and eager and hoping to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now take questions from the audience. For any of these three candidates, I need you to please come to the microphone and identify yourself and ask your questions. You don't have to raise hands, just come on over to the microphone and ask your question. Be careful.
Barbie Wolfenden, 23 Heather Lane. I was just wondering, David, about the order in which you place the warrant articles after the sort of general town articles that are placed on the, what are your criteria for that?
Well, there's an interesting answer to that. That's these two people over here are actually responsible for ordering the warrant. So the selectmen produce the warrant. What really happens is their administrative assistant and Bill Wrigley, to a lesser extent, organize the warrant, and then they view it and decide if they want to change things around. And I unofficially get into that process mostly because their administrative assistant will ask me, gee, do you think this order is good? But primarily it's the selectman's responsibility.
Well, then I'll ask Jim, what are the criteria you use?
I don't know if I'd say criteria, Barbie. There's a tradition that people who go to town meeting a lot know. So we have first the payroll articles and the budget articles, and then we have I want to say 15 or 16 articles that are collectively called the consent calendar, which are largely the smaller spending items that we see year after year, and for the most part, the numbers don't change. Then soon after that usually comes the capital articles. Now sometimes there'll be one or two articles in between the consent calendar and capital, and this year I don't think there are. This year capital kind of takes up maybe 3 articles if you combine the biggest capital article with the 2 that require a ballot article, the lower village, that's not going to be a ballot article, but also the fire station or fire truck. Then traditionally we have the planning board's zoning changes or other bylaw changes at the end. There were a few like the senior work-off tax credit that fit in there in between. Is there something you're particularly concerned about the location of?
Well,
I'll be honest with you, I don't think, this year I don't recall too much discussion about the location of anything because I think it pretty much followed that template that I just laid out.
no, thank you for that, Jim. Yes, well, it was just a curiosity thing that, and also if an item is placed at the very end and people get tired and they leave, then that particular warrant item may not be given as much attention as it might have gotten if it were placed first in its little grouping. I understand there's tradition. And that was my question, that your criteria for placement.
That's why we put the planning board stuff at the end to inflict the least amount of pain on the least amount of people. There, a little joke with Lori. There is a mechanism that I forget for moving things up that has occasionally been invoked. So that is possible.
And that would happen if the warrant sponsors would be requesting it? Or?
No, I mean on the floor of town meeting.
Oh, on the floor, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I will just add to that, yes, any voter can make a motion to change the order of an article. And if anyone's interested in the mechanics of that, you can ask me.
Courtney, did you have anything to
I
add?
have nothing to add.
Don't want to leave you out.
Hi, Lori Clark, 39 Bradley Lane. It's okay. I understand. People don't want to talk about bylaws unless it's about marijuana. I just have a curiosity question for you, Courtney. What has made you want to change from Concom to Board of Selectmen?
I admit that I like to try new things. That's probably just the simple answer. I am not necessarily leaving the Conservation Commission yet. I believe I will not be able to be the representative to the Community Preservation Committee from the Conservation Commission. So that's kind of the short answer.
Any other questions?
Ellen Sturgis, 12 Canterbury Road. I'm just wondering for the selectmen, since you both raised that Bill's leaving, are there skills that you would, I mean, you both commented on how, Bill is someone, we've known him very well. He's our only town administrator. Are there skills that you're thinking about that you'd be looking for in a candidate that might not be currently in Bill's sort of pace?
Do you want? I haven't given this a lot of thought because we've had other stuff on our mind that I've kind of targeted right after town meeting to really start this discussion with the board. But to the extent that I have thought about it, I don't want a clone of Bill. I want someone who will go to more evening meetings. I think we have a need for a presence there, either from a town administrator, or I think one day, and one day soon, we're going to have an assistant town administrator, largely to cover other meetings like that. I've given more thought to the type of person that I'd be willing to really consider or not consider. We're going to get a ton of resumes from people who've had, they've been selectmen like me, and I'm not overly inclined to like that. It's different being an elected official and having day-to-day responsibility. I'm going to be very open to someone who has been a town administrator in another town, or an assistant town administrator, or an assistant town manager, and wants to step up. I want somebody with flexibility of mind. And what I mean by that is I want somebody who's going to have new ideas and not necessarily want to do everything the way Bill did, but also pick and choose through the things that work and keep the things that work. I will hear Bill and some of my colleagues say that we want someone who knows how Stow works. I don't really know what that means. One thing that I think it means, and it's a good thing, is why do we have all the stored assets? And Ellen, you know the answer to this. Why do we have all the stored assets that we have? Why are we in such good shape? Why are we in so much better shape than Bolton? Well, there's one key thing. Every time we want to borrow money, it has to be voted on twice. It has to be voted on at town meeting, passed by 2/3, and then it has to go to a ballot. And then we do a debt override. Most towns don't do that because they're afraid the debt overrides won't pass. And occasionally in Stow, they have not. But the result is that when we borrow money, those projects are not competing for dollars with operating budgets. And when we borrow money, it has a constituency. It has passed voters twice. I want somebody who's going to have flexibility of mind and do things differently, but recognize there are certain things about Stow that we do that are really good. Other than that, I'm open.
Still thinking about my answer. Working with Bill the little bit that I have because of being on the Community Preservation Committee, I've just gotten to like him. I like his matter-of-factness, and I just like that he's very straight. I guess business-like, but important to me. First of all, second of all, I'd like to say that everything that Jim just said is well-spoken, and I would agree. I think there are a few things that Mr. Wrigley has a strong opinion about, and I don't necessarily think that he's wrong, but I also would be interested to see what somebody else might, how somebody else might approach some of those things. One of them being whether we have municipal water, for instance. I'm not saying I think it's a good idea, it'd be interesting to have a different conversation. So that would be one sort of an example.
Any other questions? Sure.
Hi, folks. Mike Kopczynski, 12 Canterbury Road. David, I had a question for you, just in the long term, because in terms of over the last X years, we used to have really contentious multi-day town meetings, and we certainly, by putting in a number of practices, that has become much more smooth, and I think we have, I think, one of the best when run town meetings, that I'm aware of. But it seems that the planning, one of the things that's changed is since you've been moderator, is that the emphasis on planning for the meeting has changed a little bit. And I was just wondering what your philosophy is about that, and if you could expound a little bit on it.
Well, we still, for the annual town meeting and any town meetings where there's more than a trivial number of things, any special town meetings, we still have an organizational meeting. We'll be having one this Wednesday called a Stow's meeting, the Stow Town Officials Working Group, which anyone can come to, but it's not to discuss the content of anything in town meeting, just to sort of choreograph who's going to say what when, and who's going to make motions, and who's going to make presentations. We still do that. I've added, when we don't have a Stowe's meeting, usually when there's a one-item special town meeting, I've done open office hours at the library. And typically I get a handful of people that come in with specific or sometimes just general, unrelated to that town meeting questions. But I guess my philosophy is just mostly to continue what we've done in the past, and if there's anything that we could do better, I'd be happy to consider it. I suppose I won't beat that horse to death, but feel free to give me any.
All right. I would like to thank Okay, this will be the last question then.
Thank you. Don Hawks. I've been privileged to work as a selectman for 7 years of your 9 years, Jim. I'm delighted that we'll have the ability to work together some more, and I welcome Courtney, whom I've worked with on Concom, so a lot of respect for both of you. You mentioned some of the challenges of the future. I don't think you've covered those well. But you've talked about transportation and water, Jim, I think. I just wonder what other positions you think questions are more likely to be vexing for the town beyond those two, kind of crystal balling something further. And I'm surprised that my predecessor didn't ask this question. Second part of it is the town's master plan specifies that one of the priorities that the selectmen should be working toward is affordable housing. And Mike has done his best and beyond all limits of trying to get that achieved. And except for a couple of small instances, he hasn't met with any success. So I'd like to see what you might, kind of long range and particularly affordable housing. Thank you.
I don't know that I can crystal ball any other issues. I think the demographics and the character of the town are changing a little bit. 50 years ago, we started the transition from rural to suburban when 495 was built close by. Some people find that to be heresy to even think that we're a suburb, but we're more suburban than we think. Now that businesses are located on 495 and 128, we're seeing a change in character of the town as people with higher incomes are moving in and people with lower incomes are struggling to stay. I don't think that in and of itself is going to be an issue, but I think the way we debate other issues is going to change, or I think we're going to hear new voices. I think that's going to affect a lot of things. On affordable housing, I think SMOT has definitely done its best. I think I stood here, 3-4 years ago, and you could say, SMOT hasn't proposed any projects. Well, that has certainly changed. I am getting a little tired now of seeing perfectly good projects being proposed and defeated for reasons that I don't understand. I'm very grateful that the joint Concom SMOT project on Red Acre got approved. I hear voices saying that what we need is just one or two big 40Bs, friendly 40Bs. Maybe that is a solution. If so, it requires a lot of thought. We're going to have the opportunity to give something like that a lot of thought with the golf courses, which I think I did mention. I hope that answers your question. I don't know that my crystal ball has anything else in it.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you have something to add?
I'd just like to say that I would love to see some good solutions for affordable housing. And my experience is that it's a very difficult conversation. But I think perhaps getting consensus in a neighborhood when a project might be developed there is perhaps a very good start, the way we did in the most recent one. And I think it will make Stow a lovely place to continue to have the range of incomes that we already have had. I don't think it's going to change us for the worse.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank this panel, and we'll ask the second panel to come up. Now we're going to hear from 4 candidates. Leah Viverito, who is a candidate for Neshoba Regional School District Committee. This seat is currently held by Lynn Coletti, who is not running for re-election, and we thank Ms. Coletti for her services on the Neshoba Regional School District Committee. Lori Clark is an incumbent running for the Planning Board. Kathleen O'Brien, incumbent running for the Library Board of Trustees. And Laura Reiner, incumbent running for the Library Board of Trustees. We'll now hear from Leah Viverito.
Excuse me. Good evening, fellow residents of Stow. I'm Leah Viverito, and I would like to start by saying thank you to our hosts, the League of Women Voters. It is your organization founded in 1920, I understand, by suffragist Carrie Chapman Catt that aided in the effort to pass our 19th Amendment, making my position here today possible. So as I sit here, I'm fully aware of how this is possible. It's through the grit of grassroots organizers like yourselves who believe average citizens, men and women alike, should play a role in our government. So it's in that spirit I ask for your support as I run for a seat on the school committee. I understand your organization is a nonpartisan one, which is fitting for the office I seek, should have no political agenda. I'm sure we all agree the school committee is a place where people work together for a better future for our kids. If elected, my chief operating principle will be to do what is best for as many kids as possible at all times. In every vote I take, you can trust I will ask myself and those around me, is this good for our kids? So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I don't think I know many of you here. So I want you to know what motivates me to run for this very important position. I was born and raised a little bit west of here in Leominster, Massachusetts. My mom was a public school teacher for 32 years and eventually became the superintendent of schools there. So she taught me to have a deep and abiding love for our public school system, to believe in its potential to do great things for all kids, no matter where they come from. And as Horace Mann, our first Secretary of Education, once said, education beyond all other devices of human origin is the great equalizer of the conditions of men. I believe the political schools have an enormous role to play in our democracy, and it is a noble tradition that I hope to contribute to. So my husband Anthony and I have 4 children in the Neshoba public school system. They're entering 9th grade, 6th grade, 3rd grade, and 1st grade. And for the first time, we'll have a child in every one of our public schools. And dare I say, a high schooler in our midst. That said, I'm no stranger to secondary education. I've been a high school teacher for 17 years. So I spent the first part of my career in Ipswich and the latter in my second home, Hudson. The courses I teach are world history, American studies, constitutional law, and my favorite, political science. This was my area of study as I was an undergraduate at UMass Amherst. I also have a Master's of Education degree from Fitchburg State University. And most recently, I completed a post-baccalaureate program of educational leadership at Northeastern, obtaining my licensure for secondary administration. So although I'm certified to be a principal and a curriculum director right now, I have a hard time imagining leaving my classroom. There's nothing more thrilling than watching kids learn and helping them understand that they can create positive change in their world. To be a teacher is very difficult, but it is endlessly rewarding. So if elected to our school committee, I hope to use my professional experience to better the public schools for all of our kids and grandkids. So as the school committee opens a new term, I know that there are many pressing issues. I understand our school committee has committed itself to the eventual introduction of full-day tuition-free kindergarten. I am in support of this measure. I hope to assist with its successful implementation. I also know that there's an ongoing debate regarding the physical plant of our high school. Knowing Superintendent Clenchey has already engaged the Massachusetts School Building Authority, I assume we are in the process of exploring options. So having taught at 2 new state-of-the-art high schools, both of which are model schools for the MSBA, I can say that the education of our children is significantly improved by having innovative spaces and technologically advanced resources with which to instruct them. Despite the cost of renovating or rebuilding, this can uplift property values significantly. I'm a supporter of continuing this exploration because I think it's what's best for our kids. Another really pressing issue that our schools and our children are facing is a challenging mental health landscape. We need innovative programs and tiered interventions to address the needs of all of our children at every level. I regularly work with kids who have individual needs, and I know how important it is to provide teachers and administrators with the tools they need to address the multitude of scenarios that come up daily, especially in the social and emotional domain. This will take a dedication of time, training, and resources so that our schools can meet these new challenges as they become more complex. Lastly, I hope to engage in the conversation regarding curriculum, instruction, and assessment for the 21st century. Families have more choices than ever right now in where they educate their kids, and I want to build upon the already very strong reputation of the Neshoba Public Schools, where rigorous and creative programs entice students to choose Neshoba, thereby ensuring high enrollment and a competitive advantage for decades to come. This is a lofty agenda, but I know we're up to the task, so I hope that you can support me on May 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Next, we'll hear from Lori Clark, incumbent running for the planning board.
First, I just want to say that was extremely impressive and inspiring. Thank you. So, for those of you who don't know me, yes, my name is Lori Clark, and I am running for re-election of the Planning Board. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for the invite tonight and for hosting the event. And I want to start a bit by telling you about myself. I moved to Stow 12 years ago. After being here a year, I found myself visiting the Planning Board to give input on some bylaw changes they were proposing. I began attending their meetings regularly to learn more about what they did and how it could shape the future of Stow. I guess you could say I became a planning board groupie, and maybe as uninteresting as that may sound to some of you, I think whenever the planning board puts forward change, we tend to spark new interest, and that's how we got most of our members, and so I'm no different. After a while, the planning board decided to appoint me as an associate member because they figured if I was going to come regularly, they may as well put me to work. So that was about 11 years ago. 10 years ago, I stood here in this same venue, introducing myself and telling you why I chose to move to Stow. In preparing for tonight, I went back to that preparation material to see what did I say 10 years ago. And I am happy to say that while I have a much better understanding about planning, that was my first 10 years was my first foray into it, and town government as well as a better understanding of the town's bylaws. My reasons for wanting to live in Stow remain consistent as they were 10 years ago. Stow is a unique town It has a unique town character, especially for a town that is so close to Boston. It has a rural setting, and even though Jim has said that we've become more suburban, I think relatively speaking to suburban towns, we have a lot of rural characters and a lot of scenic vistas. It is still very active in agriculture and continues to look for ways to encourage the continuing or even increase of agriculture. And it has a significant amount of open space and a commitment to protecting it as well as the natural resources that we have as well. And it also is interested in preserving historical nature of things that are around as well. These are the characteristics I called out 10 years ago of why I chose to move to Stow. And these are the same reasons that today I am still interested in running for re-election of the planning board, as I see it as a way to help shape the future of Stow and encourage the type of development that is fitting with those characteristics. For those of you who don't know my background, I was born in Worcester, raised in Oxford, Massachusetts, central Massachusetts, for those of you who don't know where that is. I attended Worcester Polytechnic Institute as a mathematical sciences major. And prior to moving to Stow, I lived in Hopedale, Massachusetts for about 13 years, also a fairly small town. I spent years working at Bose Corporation, and right now presently work at Perkin Elmer in Waltham, leading their information technology project management office. Besides serving the last 11 years as a planning board member, I have also volunteered for additional subcommittees as well, pedestrian walkway and lower village subcommittees. And for the past 4 years, I've been reappointed to as the chair of the planning board. I'm going to skip to, given I'm the 1 minute warning. Some of the pending issues I see in front of the planning board upcoming really have to do with addressing the challenges of completing the Lower Village construction project, which maybe you've heard about. Driving forward bylaw changes and design guidelines that help shape the future development in Lower Village, specifically encouraging businesses to fit within the town's character, encourage businesses that do fit within the town's character. Assessing zoning bylaws to protect the scenic vistas of the golf courses. I have proactively gotten the various boards together to start discussing that. And then continuing to pursue Gleasondale planning efforts that have come my way. I guess for those of you who have observed me in action, you'll know me to be a direct communicator and fair, and I am choosing to run again because I'm passionate about the town, and I look for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Next, we'll hear from Kathleen O'Brien, who is the incumbent, or one of the incumbents, for the Library Board of Trustees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I've had the opportunity to serve a couple of terms on the board. I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing and committed members of the board. And we have a wonderful library director who keeps the library running smoothly. The most notable and recent event was a restoration of the original portion of the library. There was a restoration committee that created the focus for all the choices to guarantee the beautiful results that we have. There were also other people and groups who made certain that we had money well spent. The important piece was the CPC, and the other part was the Friends for the library, and the most important were the historical groups that we had an opportunity to work with. Currently, the board is excited about the renovation of the rest of the library. The board would like to increase the space and the number of the services. We are investing in our essential services right now. These are just quick numbers. Harvard has about 6,500 people, and they spend about 55 55 and 300,000. Bolton is 8,675. They spend 4,007. Foxborough, we're talking about libraries. Did I mention that? I don't know. Foxborough is 537 people. Thank you. I need all the help I can get. And they spend 372. Lancaster has 8,000 people, and they spend 330,000 for their library. Stow, who has more than any of these groups, have almost 700,000 people, and sorry guys, I need a little. Thank you.
We really are urban.
Yes, but anyways, I do want. Would you want to say that number for me? 233,000 is all we spend, so we're really under investing. And we also have a lot of issues with improving the library with the handicap accessibility. There are issues involving the safety of the elevator. There are issues with the lack of number of computers. There are issues regarding the sharing of space with the adults, the youth, and the children. We have to remember that the library is a marvelous space with so many programs and so many opportunities. We need to renovate and help all residents enjoy the welcoming space that is our library. Please support us at town meeting.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you not finished?
Definitely.
You're fine. Now we're going to hear from Laura Reiner, who is also an incumbent running for the Library Board of Trustees. Laura?
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Reiner. I've lived in Stow since 2004, and I'm running for re-election to a 3-year term for the Board of Trustees after serving out a 1-year term of an unfilled seat on the board. Why am I running? Like everyone in this room and those of you watching on Stow TV, I love Stow. I've volunteered for various activities around town over the last 15 years, but when I was working full-time and commuting, I just didn't have the energy for all those meetings at night. I always vowed that when I retired, I would get more involved. Well, now I'm retired. And since I spent the last 20 years as a librarian at various area colleges and universities, it made the most sense to me that I should get involved with the library. I'm a big fan of public libraries in general and Randall Library in particular. For such a small library, so with such meager funding relative to our neighbors, Randall offers a tremendous range of services. I think it's important that we continue to be the best library we can be while making careful use of the budget allotted to us and continue to innovate to meet the changing needs of the town while still providing the great personal service that Randall is known for. My first year on the board has given me a better idea of the role of the board and how I can be most effective. Looking forward, I believe my main goals will be to get a more detailed sense of how the community wants its library to evolve and to advocate for the improvements to the library that Kathleen outlined in order to meet modern program and service needs. I ask for your vote on May 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, candidates. Now we can have questions from the audience for these candidates. Please come to the microphone and identify yourself before asking your question.
Yes, again, Don Hawks, Dawes Road, Lake Boone. I always like to give a plug for a beautiful part of town. I'd like to, I've been on the, I'm in my 3rd term, so a little over, just about 7 years. And I believe for all of that term, or all but perhaps one year, I've been liaison for the Board of Selectmen. We split up our responsibilities to kind of be as watchdogs and a conduit of conversation between various boards. And it's been my pleasure to fill that role for the Neshoba School Committee for that period of time. There was not mentioning any names, obviously, there was a former chair of Neshoba, district, now no longer a member of the board and not a Stowe resident, who was quoted, I'm pretty sure it was at a public meeting, but at least to an individual that I highly respect in that other town. And it went to the effect, paraphrasing, as a member of the school committee, my only responsibility is to the kids. I'm afraid I heard echoes of that tonight from what I didn't hear in your presentation, which was an excellent one as far as it went. School budget takes up 2/3 of all of our tax dollars. And we are fortunate in the past few years to have a very cool...
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you right there. What's the question?
The question is, please address the need to balance fiscal responsibility with a need for an excellent continuing education.
Excellent question. Thank you so much.
So my understanding of my role is to do what is best for the kids with the resources we have available to us. And so if we are going to be deciding what our programming is, we take the dollars that we've been allotted and we try to create the programming to the best of our ability. And so when I said my operating principle, chief operating principle, is to do the very best for the kids, because I see that as what is our future, what I mean is with the resources available to us. And so as a taxpayer myself, who has to create and live by a very strict budget, I understand that raising taxes is not an ideal scenario at all, and that resources are limited. And so I plan to do a lot of learning as I sit on the board. Hopefully if I'm elected, unopposed at this moment in time. So if I do sit on the school board, I know that the budget is going to be probably one of the most important conversations we have.
Other questions?
No numbers, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Jones. I live at 52 Whitman Street, and I'm a former school committee member. I address this to our candidate for school committee. You will have a large task set before you. I found it a little alarming how much work it is to be a school committee member, so I congratulate you on stepping up to that task. It is no small task. It is the nature of all municipalities and all school districts to have more demand for services than there are resources, and you will be well familiar with the difficulty of allocating what is most important for the resources available. One of the resources that the school district has never really properly dealt with was health insurance for retirees. We are now paying for health insurance for people who retired 20 years ago who educated people 30 years ago. So families have gone, the students have gone, and the employees have gone. And right now we're going into debt $1 million a year because we haven't been paying that amount.
I'm sorry, again, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to ask and request that those who come to ask a question sort of think about the question first and ask the question.
So in this year's budget, there's only $100,000 being paid down towards that $1 million a year deficit. And I would like to know what your thoughts are on dealing with that annual deficit, for which we, as a district, now owe $40 million in debt for services of health insurance for all of our retirees.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
So I think that meeting the promise we made to retired individuals is important. I think that healthcare is a very difficult subject that is plaguing every corner of our nation. So the fact that Neshoba regional schools are having difficulty meeting those obligations is no surprise. So when I am, and if I am, put onto the school board, I plan to make it my job to become familiar with all of the financial situations that are dogging the district. So to say that we are in debt millions of dollars probably sends shivers up everybody's spine. So it's something that we need to deal with. And I look forward to working with the committee and with the superintendent to understand how we can do that.
I have heard many times that some people in Stow feel we don't need a library, really, because people aren't really even reading books anymore. We've got books online. We can get everything we need from the internet. And so my question to each of you, or together, why do we need a good, or just even a library in Stow?
No numbers, but yes, we will always need a library. We need it for the social reasons. We need it for all the new things that keep coming up, all the computer stuff, as well as all the things that are like the 3D printer, all the things that they need. We're just going to always need libraries. So that we found that people in studies, people really like to browse. That's their favorite thing. Not to get a book, not to get on a Kindle. They just want to browse. And we're going to make sure they can.
I would just add that it's been mentioned earlier that we have the highest percentage senior population in the Commonwealth, I think. And seniors overwhelmingly prefer print books and large print books, audio books, downloadable ebooks for free to their Kindle or other reading device. And the other large population in this town that continues to grow are families with young children. Every year, young children need to learn how to read. They don't do it on a Kindle. And studies have shown that learning using print is more effective, and there are issues with too much screen time for children. So all told, there's a lot of need for the physical library providing the services for children learning to read, as well as older adults who want to browse or avail themselves of many different formats of information.
First, I just want to thank all of you and the previous candidates for running, because it's really extraordinary just to hear that you're finding time in your lives to do things. So thank you all. Lori, since no one's asked you, and thank you, knowing how much planning board takes, and it takes you at least 5 years to understand the job, thank you for sticking with it. I appreciate it. So if you didn't have Lower Village and some of the other crises that might come up, what would you just love to work on that you haven't been able to work on the last 10 years?
It's a great question. I'm not sure in that question if you were excluding the golf course issue or not. I do think that as much as Lower Village has taken a lot of our resources and focus, the fact is we have a lot of golf courses in town, and some of them, business-wise, have not been doing that well and have been looking at their options. So in a way, I think that we are behind in terms of how to structure bylaws that encourage development to protect the vistas. So one thing that golf courses do offer us are some great vistas as you drive down 62, for example. And what we've been talking about recently is if one of them were to sell, what could be done there, I think would absolutely change the look and feel of this town. And so trying to proactively get the boards together to figure out what can each of the boards, and from a planning board, it's zoning, do to encourage the type of development in the future. So plan for the future, the type of development in the future that would protect the scenic vistas, but still enable landowners to do some development on their property if that's what they choose.
Hi, Elaine Sanfilippo, 156 Maple Street. My question's for Lori. Given Stow's rural character and agrarian character, what are your opinions on, or maybe what is the planning board working on with regards to climate change and how we're planning for that as a town?
I'm not sure we've talked about climate change too much, but I do know there's I may get the verbiage wrong on this, but there's an sort of a emergency preparedness action that's happened where we applied for a grant to basically help the town sort of assess that or come up with a plan, and that has to do with water. So it relates to climate change, but it's not directly addressing climate change. But that right now is the one thing I would say that we have in the pipeline.
Anything else? Before we take our 5-minute stretch and have our next panel come up, I think I need to share something with you that I have not shared yet. The purpose of this meeting from the viewpoint of the League of Women Voters is to get information to the voters. Because it's an information situation, we don't want to necessarily have discussions, or should I say debates. It's a time to ask questions and get information, and if you have to be ready, then you will be ready for a town meeting and can really debate with knowledge. So let's take 5 minutes and change our, thank you. There are 2 Proposition 2.5 override ballot questions. Question 1 is a new fire truck, and it will be read and explained by Fire Chief Joseph Landry. And question 2, the town building new HVAC system will be read and explained by Building Inspector Craig Martin. Steve Jelnick will also give information on both ballot questions from the perspective of the Capital Planning Committee. We'll now hear from Chief Landry.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. So we're looking at the replacement of our engine 14. I can give you some. So engine 14 was manufactured in 2001, so it's coming up to the 19-year mark. It was actually purchased by the town of Stow in 2003. It was a demonstration model, so it had some mileage on it, and it had some wear because it was used to go around for the manufacturer to display it and let municipalities use it to see if it was the type of vehicle they were looking for. Couple of things. This was purchased back when we had a desperately aged fleet. I started in the department 34 years ago, and we had 1956, 74, 68, 78 vehicles. This vehicle was one of the ones that was starting to bring them out of those extremely aged fleet. It was getting us to a point where we were, the National Fire Protection Association is it's our regulatory system, essentially. They set standards for us some of them are unachievable, but for the majority of them, they set those standards. So this was one of the pieces that initially brought us up to that level. It was purchased in conjunction with a second pumper at the time in 2003, and that will come up into play in a few slides just to give you an idea of where we're looking. So that's the engine itself. I just want to take a really quick minute to just give everybody a little bit lay of the land for the town of Stow. As you probably know, we do not have fire hydrants. For a firefighting operation, these pieces of equipment are essentially, in a municipality that has hydrants, it's your pumping station, it's your plumbing in the ground, it's your hydrant that sticks out of the ground. These pieces are moving parts to that in the town of Stow. So what we have right here, you'll see these names come up. There's a fire attack piece, a scene feeder. This essentially would be up someone's driveway if you had a structure fire. That's the vehicle it pulls in. These are tanks of water that we put out in the street that we dump into. This is essentially your hydrant out at the street. As we move forward, this is called a source pumper. That's the truck that we're looking to replace at this point. That's actually a pumping station. That goes right down to the water and actually moves the water from wherever it is and either puts it into a tanker if it's more than 1,000 feet away or pushes it down a line. These are our tankers right here. So that would be so these are the names you'll see as we're talking and how this all works into a plan. So this is our current fleet right now. Our newest vehicle is the tanker, which was 2011, but for our pumpers, which are the key components to this operation, our newest is 2005, and these two are both the same age. This is engine 15 and engine 14. One key thing to recognize that this replacement is part of a plan, not just a capital purchase. It's part of the capital plan. These two pieces of equipment, their pumps were starting to age. Well, they were aging 3 years ago, and we were having some troubles with them, same as this one. I replaced, through the voters voted to replace the pumps in those vehicles. Those two pump replacements have extended the life expectancy of those vehicles by a minimum of 5 to 7 years. They've extended them out from where they were supposed to be replaced. When I took the department over in 2013, this one was actually put on the ballot, was on the capital to be replaced in 2017, and we've extended that life for that vehicle. So as we move forward, it'll just explain, where this 2001 Sterling falls into place. This is just a really quick picture to give you an idea, like I was talking. So this is it's essentially your pumping station, and these are kind of the layouts. So there's our attack piece, there's our tanker, there's essentially the hydrant that would sit out at your street if you were in a municipality. And then these are the other layout signs. So they're just an idea to give you what it takes for us to fight fires in Stow without hydrants. So getting to the engine itself, the key component that brought us here today is, because this was on capital for next year, but it brought us forward, this failed its annual pump test. It was declining rapidly, but with the replacement of the two others and the anticipation that this was going to be replaced, we worked very hard to extend it out one more year, but it would not pass. We tried everything we could to get it to pass. And that's a third-party testing. That's not a vendor. That's not us doing it. We hire a company that comes in and certifies these pumps that they will flow what they're designed to flow. And that design is made so that we can move large volumes of water, like your pumping station would if it was a pump station. The other deficiency to this truck is it was purchased as I wouldn't say an emergency purchase, but it wasn't really designed for Stow. It was an off the lot that filled a very desperate need at the time. So what it really is it's always going to be a source pumper. Even as we look at some of our options, fixing this truck, it will always be a source pumper. Our 2005 attack piece is aging at this point, and this is more part of a plan. By replacing this, it solves our need, but it also extends the life of our trucks that are running on a daily basis right now. The cabin chassis is not produced anymore. It's a Sterling truck. Ford was bought out by Sterling. Sterling essentially went belly up. There's opportunity to get the parts, but as you noticed in those pictures, every piece of equipment we have is utilized if we need to move water. We don't have spare trucks. So when this goes down, if it takes 2 weeks to get to get parts for it, we need to set up mutual aid agreements with other communities to help us if we do get a call for a fire. So a lot of this really kind of leans on the fact of being out self-sustainable, because we don't want to rely on them because everybody around is fairly short-staffed. All it takes is one medical, and you don't have that other vehicle that you essentially rely on. So some of the benefits with the new pumper, we're designing it to fit into any of the functions. So it will start out, it will come into the place and it will take place of that attack piece. But as the years go by, it will be able to rotate through. It's going to relieve stress from the other aging apparatus by moving pieces around. It will be designed with today's standards in mind, with people not having to climb up to the top to grab 250-pound porta tanks. They'll actually be designed lower. It will definitely define, it'll enhance our operation. Some of the options is rebuilding the pump. It will not relieve the stress. The age cab will still give us delay in getting parts, and it has nothing to do with spacing out our operation. We're trying to space out these capital purchases to help the town in a bigger picture. The pump rating, it doesn't have any, doesn't meet our operational needs. You're just changing numbers. It's just an option that's been out there. Really quick, I just wanted to kind of show the concept of this as being part of a bigger plan. The replacement of this truck affords us to put a 6-year span between the replacement of that next piece. If we do anything but replace it and say we Band-Aid it, we put a pump into it, what it's going to do is it's going to add life to it, but it's going to put us into an area where we're looking at about 1.3, 1.4 billion or more in a 1 or 2 year window, where and by replacing the pump on both engine 15 and engine 12 at that time, we've pushed that one out to FY31. I know those are big numbers and they're way out there, but it's really the replacement of this solves our initial issue, but it also looks at a much bigger plan is where we're looking at. So, any questions? We'll go right to the questions.
No, we'll wait for
Okay.
all the questions at the end.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Joe. Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Craig Martin on question 2.
Thank you very much. Craig Martin, your building commissioner, facilities manager for the past 12 years. What I've tried to do in the department is take each of our town buildings that are under my responsibility and move them forward in terms of improvements so that we can get an additional 30 years at least out of mechanical systems or other systems. Of course, we did a brand new building or a rehab of a building down at the Pompano Community Center and the fire station. So I'm very proud about that particular project. But in regards to this project, so the building, the town office building was built in 1989. It had, thank you very much. So the equipment has been running there for 30 years. Typical mechanical life is around 15. So we've gotten quite a bit out of this system over that. Let's go to the next one. So it's a 4-story building. It's 15,000 square feet, which is pretty good size. The original boilers from 1989 are about the end of the life on the boilers. We can't get parts for them. They're only 76% efficient. We can do much, much better today. So we have also, they run the heat side of it, and we also have forced hot air with heating and cooling coils. Pretty much a basic system that runs, once we get it going per season, it runs almost 24/7, just at a constant speed. The baseboard heating, we did check the condition of the copper piping on the baseboard heating in the offices, and we're actually going to keep the baseboard heating components. We're going to change out the heating, the boilers and so forth, but we're going to keep that particular component. Just a quick picture of the old boilers down in that boiler room. It's another view as well. That boiler room is about the size of a 2-car garage, and there's quite a bit of equipment packed into that area. A lot of it you can't see because it's up on the ceiling and it's all blended together. So existing operation. Right now we are operating on some automatic controls and hand-operated controls in offices. Over the past 12 years, I've spent anywhere between $5,000 and $12,000 a year on maintenance of these systems, whether it's a broken rotator shaft on the air handler or new pumps for the circulating hot water. Again, I'm running into the fact that I can't find parts, so that's a bit of an encumbrance. Comfort is variable in the building. Most offices keep a t-shirt and a ski parka available so that they have an option. So the past 5 years, I've had 3 incidents where I've almost had to shut the building down for no heat. We didn't quite get to that point. I was able to get emergency service, get a tech in there, actually make the repairs and get the building up and running, but I was that close to sending people home 3 times, and really that's not a good situation when we're trying to conduct town business in the town building. This is the famous valve that everyone uses in their office to control the heat. That's the only way. The solenoids don't work anymore. So this is the Stow TV Center, which is a big heat generator up on the 3rd floor. They don't have any appreciable AC to keep that equipment cool. This is actually our server room up on the 3rd floor. That is a portable AC unit, which I put in there about 2 years ago, ran the exhaust out through a soffit, and that is our server room, which everyone knows server rooms you need to keep cool. So we are keeping ahead of it, but on a temporary basis. So the design for a new system is complete, 100% complete. It is what we call a VRF system, which operates on variable refrigerant flow. It is a heat pump design, and it involves, we have 2 systems. So we have the heat pump system, the VRF, and we are proposing 2 condensing boilers because the heat pumps are super efficient all the way down to somewhere in the range of 20 degrees. Once you get below 20 degrees, the boilers have to kick in and supplement with heat. So again, the existing water baseboard heating is going to stay. And as a result of all this, we're predicting that the calculations anyway show that we can save $4,000 a year in total operating cost of the building. We spend 18 right now, and between electricity and gas, and I hope that on those projections, we can save 4 out of that. So the construction, we obviously have we have an occupied building, and to do this amount of work in an occupied building, it does present some challenges. We have 25 staff, we have the public that come and go from the building. We need to do all the things that are required under the building code, maintain safe access, egress, the elevator access, noise control, air quality, and the dust. We also have to institute, if need be, temporary heating or cooling during the period of time of construction. But the good news is, even though we figure it's a 9-month construction contract, we have looked at the actual construction time frame in the building between demolition and the work that will actually be the improvements of 4 to 5 months. So right now, my goal is to keep the building occupied. Contractor will bid the work based on us giving them the building so that they can work during the week, they can work after hours, they can work on Saturdays. It's all interior work, so I'm not concerned about noise on the exterior. Or whatever plan the contractor comes up with. We can't tell the contractor means and methods, but we can say, here's the building, here's what has to be done, and you tell us how you're going to do it. This is the 1st floor hallway. Right at the elevator, right near Linda's office, unfortunately, but it is one of the major areas where we're going to need to put ductwork, new ductwork, and components up in that ceiling. Not an easy task, but it can be done. We have that on the 1st floor, the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor. I know you can't really read this, but this is basically the configuration in the basement of all the piping and the ductwork that's going to need to go in that 2-car garage area and in the hallway in the basement level just outside the elevator. This is another view. This is actually above the view that I just showed you. This is the ductwork that's all going to be configured in that room before it heads up to the floors above and to the side. This is a view on the 2nd floor between the elevator and the small, we call it the copy room, or it's a meeting room. And that's what's going to happen in that ceiling in that hallway, which everything you see in blue and green and purple or whatever it is Yellow is staying, but the others are all new components. We are going to tie into existing ductwork where we can, and actually the engineer has saved quite a bit of it. So we're going to tie into that where we can and minimize the impact. These slides, Arnie Epstein put these together. So basically, as a result of this project, it's projected that we will have a 53% savings in total building energy use. 69,000 pounds of annual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Arnie put these numbers together. And, we have the current building use on the left and the building, the savings and the town building carbon footprint, the before and after shown on the right-hand side. As you all know, we became a green community back in 2015. And our goal was to overall, over a 5-year period, obtain a 20% overall reduction in energy savings or use. We've done that with the police station. We did some through the library. We did some through the community center. And this building is actually kind of our flagship for obtaining that full 20% reduction. We did get money from the Green Community Grant Program. We applied that money to the police station, and that police station's been up and running since 2017. There is a second round of grant money available coming up in June. Arnie Epstein made that application for this particular project at the town building, and we're very hopeful maybe we can get some grant money in June. I kind of repeated this, but basically we're looking at municipal energy use, baseline at the top, and then after we did our work at the police station, and then the green and the will be the town building, and then our target is down at the bottom. So you can see we're progressing towards our target for making that complete, that 20% reduction. And, well, please vote on Article 36. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. We'll now hear from Steve Delnick, who is part of the Capital Planning Committee.
Hi, folks. You've heard me give this spiel before, but the way capital planning looks at projects like this is we kind of ask folks to give a 5-year projection of what their capital needs are going to look like. Both of these projects have been on each of these guys' plans for the last 5 years. So we knew these were coming. Like Chief Landry said, the truck was supposed to be on next year's plan, but because of what he talked about, how he had to essentially move that up this year, now we're basically faced with both these projects at the same time. What Craig didn't tell you was that the number he was carrying for the last few years was quite a bit smaller, but I think you heard him say that he's now at 100% design. Last year we basically gave him some money to do the design effort, to finish the design effort, and as a result of that he got an updated cost estimate. So you've heard people use the term sticker shock. We kind of knew this project was coming, but we didn't know exactly how much it was going to cost until the design effort was done. Capital planning kind of put both of these guys through the ringer. Ed's here and Jim's here, and they can both attest to how much we question both of these folks in terms of the sort of need for these projects. At our last meeting, we voted to recommend the town support both projects. We think these are both worthwhile projects for the town to do. In particular, the town building HVAC system needs to be replaced. We're persuaded that it needs to be done as soon as possible. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is all the energy savings and money savings that Craig talked about, and I'm sure Arnie could give you chapter and verse as to those issues. You don't see those savings until you actually spend the money to do the project. So we kind of need to do the project, even though it's going to be pain and suffering for Linda and everybody else that works in the building. It needs to be done. You've heard Chief Landry talk about the need for the truck. those of us that have lived in town for a long time can remember when we had major fires in town and we had to rely on, other people to actually support our efforts. This will go a long way towards him being able to be much less reliant on mutual aid and be much more flexible in terms of how they handle the work. So capital planning is convinced that these projects need to be done. The question is how to pay for them. And you will hear me speak at town meeting about how difficult this year is with respect to capital. Jim kind of touched on it in his remarks about how, capital is sort of a thing that we always face. But this year, I've been on capital planning for, I think it's 11 years. This is the most difficult year that we've faced in terms of the number of things that have come before us that all appear to have some degree of urgency. These are not the only two things that we're talking about. These are two of the priciest things, but the question is, how as a town are we going to pay for these? So, essentially our choices are to, kind of bang the taxpayers and kind of hit the tax levy and essentially pay for them out of, by essentially raising property taxes. And the other way to do it is through a debt exclusion and basically borrow the money. So, what's proposed is what I think is a pretty realistic, solution here, which is to essentially, we are in a reasonably good position as far as town debt is concerned. There's a couple of things that are coming off our debt schedule in the next next couple of years. So even though our current principal amount is 25 point something million, it's in your warrant if you want to read the numbers. Adding this $1.5 million, 1.4 million to that debt load represents a reasonable, fraction of that. To borrow this money for 10 years, it's a question you can't exactly answer. It's a question of what you can get for a rate. But we borrowed money for the first part of the lower village, and using the sort of projection as far as what we got for interest rate on that, you can kind of work through the numbers and say that the additional cost of borrowing the money, essentially spreading out the payment of these two things over 10 years, will cost an average taxpayer about $8.30 on their annual tax bill. So if we're going to do the project, the question is whether we pay for it now or whether we spread the payments out over 10 years. My personal feeling is that it makes sense to bond these two projects and pay for them using borrowing. So be happy to answer any questions about that we can.
Thank you all for all that information. Now we'll take information-seeking questions on these two ballot questions from the audience. Please come to the microphone, identify yourself.
Yeah, Don Hawks, member of the Board of Selectmen. In speaking so highly of Bill Wrigley, we owe a lot of our fiscal stability to the way he has financed in the past. And this is a kind of an inside baseball question that we talk about a lot. Steve, to you, will you distinguish between over a 2.5 override and a debt exclusion as it affects the taxpayers?
Is that an inside softball question or is that an inside baseball question? Because frankly, I'm not sure what you're asking, Don.
Well, if the moderator will allow me, we had in the past we had a lot of override questions. When you vote a override, it's part of your tax levy forever, and it compounds each time you do overrides. A debt exclusion is approved only for the life of the bond. Once that bond is retired, presumably your tax that is taken off there, as opposed to compounding the debt for the future years. I mean, I'm trying to answer.
You're answering your own question, so thank you very much because I don't have that answer.
I hope I cleared that up because it might make a difference as to whether people are going to vote yes. And I urge people, it's important. Both of these questions need votes both at town meeting and at the ballot. So it's very important for the future of the town to encourage voters. Do not ignore the second part of that equation. If you think you voted in favor of these two questions, go to the polls and back it up with a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Laura Reiner, 35 Red Acre Road. Earlier, there was a mention of a very large free cash balance to the point where it might be too high. We need to we need to continue to spend it to keep it in check. I mean, it's a great problem to have. I'm just wondering how that plays out with the various capital planning requests this year.
Spoiler alert, the free cash balance will not be so high next year. Yeah, not to get too far into the weeds here, but we've got over $2.5 million in capital requests this year. If you look at the warrant, there's 20 items in Article 33. That's in addition to the $625,000 for the truck and $850,000 for the building HVAC system. Everybody piled on this year, so some of those stored assets will be going towards paying for some of these capital projects.
Linda Hathaway, 76 Crescent Street, also the town clerk on the first floor in the building. My question is for Craig. Is there any other way to reduce the cost or to, by having us close the building or relocate us at any point during the construction so that it could be done quicker than the four to 5 months?
Okay, so the way, there were a couple options that we're still looking at, and I don't particularly like this one, which would be to move everybody out of the building, put staff in trailers in the parking lot, run the infrastructure outside, try to conduct business, have handicap accessibility, and all those things through rain, snow, and everything else. So I don't particularly like that option. I think what's going to happen is the contractor will phase the work based on the floor. And if we're going to work on the first floor, what we might do just temporarily for that phase, and that's not the 4 or 5 months, that's probably 2 or 3 weeks out of that time frame, or maybe a little longer, is maybe alter the hours of the departments that are on that floor just to accommodate the contractor. For example, contractor might want to come in at 6 in the morning and start working, and if we said, Linda, could you run your operation from 9 o'clock until a little bit later, then that would give the contractor time to work. But I think we can phase each floor of the work and make it manageable without disrupting. I think moving out of the building is much too disruptive. So I hope that answered your question.
A little bit, but would it be cost effective to reduce any of the costs? Because
to move out of the building?
Or to we have reduced hours, or an office is closed a week or something. I mean, there's ways that we could probably do something that could work, because my understanding is a big portion of the $850,000 is the prevailing wages, and it takes so much longer to do stuff when we're in the building. That's
part of it. I mean, about half of the cost estimate is equipment, the other half is the wages and so forth. We do have to pay the prevailing wage rate for under state mass general law. We are still looking at all the options, and we will come up with the most cost-effective way to do this for that 4 to 5 month period where we're doing demolition and the actual installation of the component.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just interject here? Craig, would it be fair to say that if there were an opportunity to save costs, that you would do that during the project implementation phase as opposed to like planning for it now?
We would have that information available, but once we take bids with the contractor, then we certainly would have that whole conversation with the contractor right at the very beginning of the work. We would, we would be putting in the contract documents the available hours of the building where they could work. In other words, like I said, they could take a Saturday, they could take evenings. We were planning on moving all the meetings out of the building down to Pompo or to this building. so that the evening meetings can be taking place in other locations. So we will put some of that information in the specifications and then have that full conversation with the contractor. They're going to be bidding the work. They're going to know it's at least going to be, at least at this point, a partially an occupied building. So they'll have to bid it accordingly.
Other questions? Everyone's tired. Thank you, one and all, for coming. Thank everyone who has decided to step up and be a candidate. We are so very fortunate here in Stow. Thank you for coming.
Chief, if we look at the hybrid fire truck, just kidding.